The classroom fell silent as the teacher's voice sliced through the air. "There's no way you wrote this," she snapped, holding up the test paper like it was evidence of a crime. The girl at the back of the room, quiet, overlooked, a scholarship kid with secondhand clothes, sat frozen. Her name? Amina Davis. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't even blink. Because this wasn't the first time someone had doubted her. Just the first time it had happened in front of the entire class. The teacher stormed down the aisle, waving the paper. "This is too perfect. You cheated." But what no one knew, not the smug honor roll students, not the whispering crowd, not even the teacher, was that Amina had a secret. A truth so shocking, so powerful, it would flip the entire school on its head. And when it came out, the teacher would be the one begging for forgiveness. Stay with me, because what happened next will shatter every stereotype you've ever heard. The autumn sun streamed through the dusty classroom blinds, casting long golden stripes across the desks. Students buzzed with restless energy, the scent of paper, pencils, and lunchroom mystery meat hanging faintly in the air. It was test day in room 213, Mrs. Parker's 11th grade English class, and papers had just been returned. For most, it was a routine moment. But for one girl at the back of the room, the air was growing heavy. Amina Davis sat perfectly still, her fingers wrapped tightly around her test sheet. She had seen the red pen scrawled across the top, a big, bold A+. But instead of feeling relief, her stomach churned, because she already knew what was coming. Mrs. Parker, a veteran teacher with a sharp tongue and little patience for what she called miracle grades, had just paused at her desk. Her brow furrowed as she looked down at the paper in her hand, Amina's test. "This can't be right," she mumbled under her breath, flipping through the pages again. Her eyes scanned the essay question. Flawless structure, rich vocabulary, a perfect literary analysis of To Kill a Mockingbird. It was frankly brilliant, too brilliant. Her gaze lifted slowly, landing on Amina at the back, the girl who rarely raised her hand, the one who always seemed to be scribbling in a battered notebook during lunch, the one with the quiet voice and hand-me-down clothes. Mrs. Parker's lips pressed into a line. She rose from her seat, holding the test like it was radioactive. "Amina," she said loudly, pausing to make sure everyone heard, "can you stay after class?" Heads turned. Whispers began to swirl. Amina didn't speak. She nodded once and stared down at her desk. The bell rang. Students stood, gathered bags, but lingered longer than usual, craning necks and waiting to see what the drama was about. Mrs. Parker motioned for Amina to come forward. Slowly, Amina approached the desk. "I need you to be honest with me," Mrs. Parker said coldly. "Did someone help you with this?" "No, ma'am." "You expect me to believe you wrote this on your own?" Amina swallowed hard, keeping her voice steady. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Parker tapped the paper with a long, painted fingernail. "This is college-level work. I've never seen this kind of analysis from you before. It just doesn't add up." Amina felt her cheeks burn. She wasn't used to speaking up. She was used to going unnoticed. But something about this moment, it hit different. It wasn't just about a grade. It was about who people thought she was. "I stayed up all night working on that essay," Amina said softly. "I've been studying, practicing." Mrs. Parker scoffed. "You expect me to believe that? After months of mediocrity, you suddenly turn in a paper like this?" "I've always liked writing," Amina whispered, her voice nearly drowned out by the scraping of desks and shuffling feet outside the door. But Mrs. Parker wasn't done. She leaned in. "I'm going to have to report this to the Academic Integrity Board." Amina blinked, stunned. "You think I cheated?" "I think you're lying." The words sliced deeper than Amina expected. All her work, all her nights under dim lamplight, writing until her hand cramped, All her silent effort, her hope that maybe this time someone would notice her for the right reasons. And now, this? A false accusation. Amina didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just nodded, quietly picked up her bag and walked out. But as she stepped into the hallway, her mind was racing, not with fear, but with a quiet storm. She was tired of being underestimated, tired of being invisible until someone wanted to accuse her, tired of having to prove she belonged. And deep inside, something was beginning to wake up, something powerful. The news spread like wildfire. By lunchtime, Amina's name was on every whispering lip in the cafeteria. Not because she won an award, not because someone admired her essay, but because she had been accused of cheating. You heard about Amina? She totally copied it. No way she wrote that herself. Mrs. Parker's never wrong. That girl's toast. Amina sat alone, her tray untouched. The greasy scent of cafeteria pizza turned her stomach. Her hands rested in her lap, clenched tight to keep from shaking. Across the room, eyes darted her way, some curious, others gleeful, but none kind. She didn't speak. She didn't defend herself. She just watched and listened, and remembered, because this wasn't the first time she'd been doubted. From kindergarten to now, Amina had learned how people saw her: quiet, black, poor, invisible, until it was time to judge. Teachers barely remembered her name. Classmates only noticed her when she wore something they thought looked too good for someone like her. And when she scored well on a test or offered an insight in class, the reaction was always the same: surprise, as if excellence and her identity couldn't exist in the same sentence. But what they didn't know was that Amina had a secret. At home, behind a squeaky bedroom door, hidden between peeling wallpaper and shelves of secondhand books, was a world she had built herself. Amina wrote. Not just school assignments. She wrote stories, vivid, layered, bursting with imagination and emotion. Characters who looked like her, sounded like her, lived like her, but rose above every limitation. Her bedroom wall was lined with pages, handwritten drafts, scribbled notes, outlines, and dreams. She wrote under candlelight during blackouts. She wrote in the back of her notebook when class got boring. She wrote on napkins, receipts, and even the backs of food boxes. And most of all, she studied. Every night, while others watched TikToks or played video games, Amina was reading Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, and Baldwin. She devoured poetry, philosophy, and prose. Her vocabulary was no accident. Her analytical mind was no mystery. She had trained it like an athlete trains muscle, quietly, relentlessly, with no audience and no applause. So yes, she did write that essay, and no one believed her. That night, Amina sat in her room, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the paper Mrs. Parker had returned. The A+ still stared back, but it felt more like a scar than a victory. She considered throwing it away, but something stopped her. Instead, she stood up, pulled down her spiral notebook, and began to write. Not a story this time, but a letter. Not to Mrs. Parker, not to the school board, but to herself. Dear me, I know this hurts. I know it feels like the world's screaming that you don't belong. But I see you. I see every word you've written when no one was watching. I see the effort, the tears, the fire. Don't let them steal your voice, because one day they'll read your words and have no choice but to believe. She tucked the letter between the pages of her journal. The next day, Amina walked into school with her head higher. Not because the storm had passed, but because she decided not to let it sink her. Mrs. Parker had already filed the report. A formal investigation was underway. She was told to wait patiently, but Amina didn't wait silently. She printed out 5 of her past essays, each marked with earlier grades, each one steadily improving. She gathered pages from her journal, printed stories, outlines, vocabulary lists, drafts. She compiled it all in a neat folder and titled it boldly, Amina Davis, My Words. When the school's academic review board met 2 days later, she walked into the room not like a girl on trial, but like a young woman presenting a case. Her case. Mrs. Parker was there, as were two other teachers and the assistant principal. Amina was given 5 minutes to speak. She took 10. She spoke softly but clearly. Her voice did not shake. "I am not asking you to give me anything," she said at the end. "I'm showing you what was already mine. My words, my work, my story." There was silence when she finished, and something more important than silence, respect. Mrs. Parker didn't meet her eyes. The next morning, the verdict came in. The board had found no evidence of cheating. The A+ would remain. But the damage? That couldn't be erased with a decision. Outside the classroom, some students whispered apologies. Others doubled down, unable to believe someone like Amina had that kind of brilliance. But one person did believe, and that belief was about to change Amina's life forever. Amina had just returned home from school when there was a knock at the front door. She set her backpack down carefully beside the couch, glancing toward the kitchen where her mother was stirring a pot of lentil stew. The knock came again, firmer this time, followed by a voice, a woman's voice, smooth and confident. "Hello, is this the Davis residence?" Amina's mother wiped her hands on her apron and approached the door with cautious eyes. They weren't used to visitors, especially ones who sounded like they belonged to another world. The door creaked open. Standing on the porch was a tall, graceful woman in a navy blue suit, her hair perfectly pinned, a leather briefcase in her hand. Her face lit up when she saw Amina standing behind her mother. "Mrs. Davis," she asked, "my name is Denise Caldwell. I'm the director of the State Youth Writing Initiative. May I speak to your daughter for a moment?" Amina blinked. Her heart thudded once loudly against her ribs. Mrs. Caldwell stepped inside, her presence filling the small living room like sunlight through a dusty window. She sat gently on the edge of the couch and opened her briefcase, revealing a printed copy of Amina's essay, the same one Mrs. Parker had once called too sophisticated to be hers. Amina's mother sat down slowly, her face unreadable. "I came across this essay during a review meeting with the district board," Mrs. Caldwell explained, looking Amina directly in the eye. "I've read hundreds, thousands of student papers in my career, but this one stopped me cold." She placed the printed essay on the coffee table and tapped it once with her manicured fingers. "I couldn't stop thinking about it. The voice, the depth, the rhythm. I had to know more. So I made a few calls, found out about the accusation, and then I found out how you defended yourself." Amina sat frozen, her cheeks flushed. She could barely breathe. "I believe you," Caldwell said simply. "And more than that, I want to offer you something." She pulled out a slim bound folder and handed it to Amina. Inside was a scholarship application. Not just any scholarship, a full summer residency at the prestigious Langston Hughes Young Writers Institute. All expenses paid. A place where kids who loved words as much as Amina did gathered to learn from some of the best minds in literature. "You've got a gift, Amina," Caldwell said, "and I don't say that lightly. But more than talent, you've got something rarer, courage. The world tried to silence you and you responded with truth. That's what writers do. That's what leaders do." Tears stung Amina's eyes. Her mother sat in stunned silence, blinking back tears of her own. "Thank you," Amina whispered. "You don't need to thank me," Caldwell replied, standing. "Just promise me something." Amina nodded. "Never stop writing. Never shrink so others can stay comfortable. Let your brilliance be loud." After she left, the house felt different. brighter, bigger. Amina clutched the folder to her chest and ran to her room. She opened her notebook, turned to a blank page and began to write. Not because of a grade, not because of an assignment, but because her heart was bursting and her voice was awake. The following week, the scholarship committee made it official. Amina Davis was accepted into the Langston Hughes Institute. The school that once doubted her was suddenly buzzing with praise. Mrs. Parker, red-faced and nervous, tried to congratulate her in the hallway. "You must be proud," she said stiffly, avoiding eye contact. Amina gave a polite smile but said nothing, because some things didn't need words. Others, though, others deserved to be shouted from rooftops. On the last day of the semester, the principal announced over the intercom that Amina's essay would be featured in the district newsletter and submitted to a national student writing competition. As the announcement ended, there was a pause. Then, unexpectedly, applause erupted from Amina's classroom. Some of it was genuine, some of it was performative, but Amina didn't care. She wasn't clapping for herself. She was clapping for every student who had ever been doubted, for every black girl who had to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good, for every kid whose brilliance was hidden beneath stereotypes and silence, because her words had made it through, and now so would she. Amina stood behind the red velvet curtain of the school auditorium, heart pounding, palms slick. The room beyond the curtain buzzed with the low hum of restless students, murmuring parents, and faculty members seated in neat rows. It was the end-of-year honors assembly, and Principal Warner had asked Amina to deliver a short message to the student body. She hadn't planned to accept. In fact, she had nearly said no. But when she remembered how she had once felt, invisible, unheard, she knew this was her moment to speak, not just for herself, but for every student who had ever been underestimated. Behind her, Mrs. Caldwell offered a reassuring nod. "They need to hear you." The curtain lifted. Amina stepped forward into the light. She walked to the podium, the weight of countless eyes pressing down on her. But she didn't flinch. She placed her notes on the stand, looked out over the sea of faces, and spotted Mrs. Parker seated in the third row, arms folded tightly. A hush fell across the room. Amina took a breath and began. "I was accused of cheating because I used words that some people thought were too good for me, because apparently intelligence has a skin tone." There was a ripple in the audience, a shifting of posture, some gasps, and the rustle of unease. They didn't ask how I learned. They assumed I couldn't have. But the truth is, I've been writing since I was 6. My father gave me a blank notebook the day before he left for deployment. He said, "Fill it with your heart." And I did. Every night. The principal blinked. The teachers leaned in. Students, even the ones who usually tuned out, were sitting up straighter. The words I write are born from the world I live in, from the silence that follows when I raise my hand and get overlooked, from the compliments that call me surprisingly articulate, from the fear I feel when I walk into spaces that weren't made for me. But I don't write to make people comfortable. I write to make people see. Now the room was completely still. No whispers, no fidgeting, just eyes, listening. I was almost silenced, not by violence, but by disbelief. They say injustice is loud, but disbelief is quieter, more dangerous. It tells you you're not worth questioning, that your voice is too much, or your light is too bright. It tells you to shrink. But I won't shrink. She looked directly at Mrs. Parker now. To the teachers who see potential only in neat packages, I invite you to expand your vision. To the students who feel invisible, I see you. And to the ones who are waiting for permission to shine, here it is. She stepped away from the mic, and the auditorium exploded into applause. Not polite clapping, real, thunderous applause that filled every corner of the room. Principal Warner stood. Mrs. Caldwell clapped with both hands and her whole heart, and even some teachers looked at each other with a new quiet respect, except Mrs. Parker. She sat frozen, her smile tight, her hands unmoving, but her eyes betrayed her, wide with something between guilt and realization. Backstage, Amina wiped a tear from her cheek. Mrs. Caldwell met her with a warm embrace. "You didn't just give a speech," she said. "You gave them a mirror." Amina nodded. "I just said what needed to be said." The next morning, something unexpected happened. An email from Mrs. Parker. It was short, awkward, clumsy, but it was an apology. "Amina, I want to sincerely apologize. I misjudged you. You deserve better. I'm sorry." Amina stared at the email for a long moment. Then with calm grace, she replied, "Thank you for acknowledging it. I hope next time you believe the brilliance when you see it." That afternoon in English class, Mrs. Parker made an announcement. A new assignment, but not for grades. "For growth," she said. She pulled out a stack of student essays, this time anonymous. "I want us to learn how to hear each other better. No names, just voices." It was a small change, but in that moment, Amina saw something begin to shift. Sometimes change comes with riots. Other times it starts with a girl who refused to be erased and chose instead to write herself into history. Amina didn't expect to become a symbol. She didn't write her poems for applause or stand at that podium for recognition. She had spoken from a place of truth, and sometimes truth has a strange way of setting off echoes you never expected. Within days of the assembly, something shifted at Westbrook High. It started small. Students began approaching her, shyly at first, asking if they could read her work or if she would help them write their own. A group of younger girls, mostly Black and Latina, began sitting near her during lunch. They didn't speak much, just sat in her quiet orbit like sunflowers leaning toward the light. One day, a freshman slid a torn scrap of paper toward her across the table. On it was scribbled, "I thought I was stupid, but your speech made me believe maybe I'm just unseen." Amina folded the note gently and placed it in her backpack like a precious gem. Even the faculty seemed to carry themselves differently around her now. Principal Warner pulled her aside to tell her that the school board had watched a video of her speech and that they were proud. That word had rarely been directed at her in this building. Now it was worn like a badge. But not everyone was changed. Mrs. Parker remained reserved, more cautious, more polite, but distant. Amina didn't need her affection. She had taken back something much more valuable, her own narrative. Then came the letter. One afternoon in late spring, she came home to find her mother sitting stiffly at the kitchen table, holding a crisp white envelope. "From Stanford," her mother said quietly, eyes brimming. "It's here." Amina's hands trembled as she opened it. Her eyes danced across the lines. "Congratulations." That was all she needed to see before she screamed, and then laughed, and then cried all at once. She had done it. Not because someone handed it to her, not because she fit their mold, but because she refused to make herself smaller to make others comfortable. Graduation came in a blur of blue gowns and golden tassels. She gave the valedictorian speech. This time, no one doubted her authorship. The stadium was silent with awe, and then alive with cheers. When she stepped down from the stage, a quiet hand touched her shoulder. She turned. It was Mrs. Parker. "I read all your essays," she said softly. "Every single one. I even saved that first poem, the one you submitted that day. I've learned more than I care to admit from you, Amina." Amina didn't say anything right away, but she nodded. That was enough. Growth, she had learned, often came in whispers, not shouts. The day before she left for college, Amina went to visit her father's grave. The summer wind rustled the trees as she knelt beside the stone and placed a single white lily, his favorite flower, on the freshly trimmed grass. "I got in, Daddy," she whispered. "Stanford. Full ride." She smiled, eyes stinging. "I filled the whole notebook, and I started a new one." She rested her hand on the stone, her voice steady now. "You told me to write with my heart. I did, even when they tried to make me feel like I didn't belong." The wind answered with a soft gust that carried her tears away. Months later, Amina's name would appear in a national magazine. A story titled Voices of Tomorrow featured her poem Unwritten, the same one Mrs. Parker had once doubted. It was now being read in classrooms across the country. She had become more than a student with something to prove. She had become a mirror, a microphone, a movement. Amina's journey reminds us of a painful truth. Brilliance is often questioned when it shows up in unexpected places. But when it refuses to be silenced, it becomes a force too powerful to deny. So the next time you find yourself under someone's shadow of doubt, remember, Amina, stand, speak, and shine anyway. Now we ask you, 1. Have you ever been unfairly judged because of how you looked, where you came from, or how you spoke? And did you speak up or stay silent? 2. What would our schools and our world look like if teachers nurtured potential instead of policing it? Let us know in the comments. Your story matters too. Don't forget to subscribe to the Arc of Stories for more powerful real-life narratives that challenge assumptions, celebrate resilience, and shine light on the stories that deserve to be told.